Guten Tag alle, Herr Wallace hier. Heute wollte ich kurz mit Modalverben arbeiten. Today we want to work briefly with modal verbs in German. This is a class of verbs in German that are very important to learn. First we're going to talk about warum sind sie so wichtig? Why are they so important? Modal verbs are important because they are used both in the present and past tense, and they're used very often. Not only will you see them in written form, you'll see them or hear them very often in spoken everyday speech. They're not the same as modal verbs in English, and another important thing to know is that when you use these verbs, as you'll see here in a minute, the secondary verb in the sentence will be pushed to the end. So in this lesson, we're going to look at each modal verb. We're going to review the conjugations in the present and the past tense and how these verbs translate roughly into English. And finally, we're going to try some sample sentences with each of the verbs, both in the present and in the imperfect or simple past tenses. So the modal verbs are wollen, to want, können, be able to, can, müssen, have to, must, sollen, should, supposed to, dürfen, to be allowed, and then, or may, and mögen, to like. So let's start our journey with the modal verb wollen, want. So let's conjugate it in the present tense. Ich will, du willst, will, wir wollen, ihr wollt, sie wollen. And one thing you'll notice is common with all the modal verbs is that the first person singular, or the form that goes with the subject ich, and the third person singular, or the form of the verb that goes with er, sie, or es, is going to be the same. And the same is true for wir and the, sie, or they, or you, polite. So you'll see this as a common thread, not only in the present tense, but also in the past tense as well. So let's look at that past tense. Ich wollte, I wanted. Du wolltest, you wanted. Er wollte, he wanted. Wir wollten, we wanted. Ihr wolltet, you all wanted, or y'all wanted. Sie wollten, they wanted. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at some sample sentences. Number one, I wanted to go with you. As I stated, one of the effects of these modal verbs is that it's going to move the other verb to the end. So in this sentence, we have two verbs, wanted and go is going to be moved to the end. So when we write this in German or say it in German, it will be Ich wollte mit dir gehen, or mit Ihnen if you want to be polite. What did she want? Was wollte sie? A word here about do and did when used with modal verbs in English. This is telling you what tense it is. Did indicates the simple past or imperfect tense. So you're going to use wollte. If this were what do or what does she want, then it would be the present tense. Was will sie? But since it says did she want, we're going to switch to the past. And remember that German has a lot more in common, word order wise, with Old English. So instead of what did she want, you're basically saying the equivalent of what wanted she. And while that may sound odd to English speakers, this is the construction as it exists in German. Do you want to play tennis? Here we'll say, willst du Tennis spielen? What do you want to say? Was willst du sagen? They wanted to go. Sie wollten gehen. He wanted to hear the song. Wollte das Lied hören. So here you can see that at the end here in number 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we have the other verb, the secondary verb, at the end, even when it's a question. And this particular one we don't because there's not a secondary verb. Okay, so moving on. Our next verb is müssen. Okay, it means must or have to or had to. So present tense, ich muss, du musst, muss, wir müssen, ihr müsst, sie müssen. And you'll notice that these umlauts that exist in the infinitive come back in the last three forms of the conjugation of the verb in the present tense. Well, they are not there in the first three conjugations in the present tense. And in the past tense, we're going to use our formula. And it's helpful for the past tense of these verbs as it is for many verbs that are regular, even though these wouldn't classify particularly as regular. But it's ta test ta, ten tet ten. So ich musste, musstest, musste, wir mussten, ihr musstet, und sie mussten. And so if I want to say in German, I have to go to the game, I'm going to say, ich muss zum Spiel gehen. Remember, zu is a dative preposition, and das Spiel will change to dem, so it's zu dem Spiel, but we're going to make a contraction as is common, and will be zum Spiel gehen. Do you have to stay? Musst du bleiben? I had to work yesterday. Ich musste gestern arbeiten. And you'll notice here we have musste because it's saying had to, not have to or has to, but had to. Did you have to say that? Remember, I told you that when you see did and you're translating, that's an indication of the past tense. So, musstest du das sagen? I had to go to class. Ich musste zur Klasse gehen. And then what do you have to do? Was musst du machen? Okay? And as I pointed out, in the past tense of these modal verbs, you will not have any umlauts. However, if the verb had umlauts in the infinitive form, as this one does, it will come back here in the last three forms of the conjugations in the present tense. Okay, moving on. Können, be able to, can or could. Ich kann, du kannst, kann, wir können, ihr könnt, sie können. Past tense. Ich konnte, du konntest, konnte, wir konnten, ihr konntet, sie konnten. Again, you see this ta, test, ta, ten, tet, ten being applied to the stem of the verb, which in this case has a vowel change from an A to an O. So I could not see. Ich konnte nicht sehen. Can you help me? Kannst du mir helfen? Remember, helfen is a dative verb, that's why it's mir. Could she drive the car? Konnte sie das Auto fahren? That could be good. Das könnte gut sein. We are able to go with you. Wir können mit dir gehen oder mit ihnen. Ich kann mein Buch nicht finden. So in all these cases, again, you'll see the other verb, whether it's sehen, helfen, fahren, sein, gehen, oder finden at the end of the sentence. And as in our last example, there will be no umlauts in the past tense, but they will come back in the last three forms of the conjugation in the present tense. Our next example is sollen, which is should or am supposed to, was supposed to. So ich soll, du sollst, soll, wir sollen, ihr sollt, sie sollen. Past tense, again with the tus. Sollte, du solltest, sollte, wir sollten, ihr solltet, sie sollten. Some sample sentences. I am supposed to be here, or I should be here. Ich soll hier sein. What are you supposed to do? Was sollst du machen? And here we know it's present tense because are supposed to is present. However, in number 3, we're saying I was supposed to, so we're going to make this past tense. Ich sollte mit ihnen gehen. Were you supposed to see that? Were is an indication of the past tense, so solltest du das sehen? That should be good. Das soll gut sein. And then what should I say? Was soll ich sagen? Okay. Next verb, mögen, to like or liked. Now you will see this most often in the present tense conjugations, which is ich mag, du magst, mag, wir mögen, ihr mögt, sie mögen. But you will not hear it spoken much using this simple past form, which is mochte, du mochtest, mochte, wir mochten, ihr mochtet, sie mochten. However, for the sake of being thorough, we're going to work with that here. You might also hear, more than likely, very often, the subjunctive one form of this verb, which is möchte, which in English equivalent would be would like. So I like you is ich mag dich. Which car did he like? Welches Auto mochte er? If I want to say which car does he like, it would be welches Auto mag er? He liked the food. Mochte das Essen. Magst du mich? I like to speak German. Ich mag Deutsch sprechen. Or this is probably less common than es gefällt mir Deutsch zu sprechen, or similar ways to express that. He did not like the answer. Mochte die Antwort nicht. So again, with our umlauts, not in the present tense, but in the not in the past tense, but in the present tense. Okay, another example, dürfen. This is our last example, completing the 6 modal verbs. Ich darf, du darfst, darf. Wir dürfen, ihr dürft, sie dürfen. Again, these umlauts are coming back. Past tense, ich durfte, du durftest, durfte, wir durften, ihr durftet, sie durften. Some examples, may I go with you? Darf ich mit dir gehen? Or mit ihnen, if you want to use the formal form. I was allowed to sing. Ich durfte singen. Were you allowed to speak? Durftest du sprechen? Is he allowed to be here? Darf hier sein? What are you allowed to do? Was darfst du machen? And I am not allowed to say that. Ich darf das nicht sagen. Okay, so this completes our review of the modal verbs. Ich hoffe, dass es hilfreich war. I hope that it was helpful. And ja, auf Wiedersehen und danke für das Zuschauen.